The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden shadows over the quiet stretch of country road. The heat shimmered off the pavement, making the distant horizon blur like a mirage. William Turner adjusted the air conditioning in his sleek black Bentley, but even the luxury of his car couldn't entirely keep the Kentucky heat at bay. He sighed, drumming his fingers against the leather-wrapped steering wheel. He wasn't used to waiting. Not in boardrooms, not in negotiations, and certainly not on the side of an empty road with a flat tire. William had built his fortune in finance, learning how to bend the world to his will with money, power, and influence. But none of those things could change the fact that he was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no cell service and no roadside assistance in sight. After a few unsuccessful attempts to reach anyone, he resigned himself to waiting. Frustration bubbled beneath his polished exterior. He had always prided himself on being in control, yet here he was, helpless, alone, and for the first time in a long time, at the mercy of circumstance. Then, in the distance, he saw movement. A lone figure was walking down the road toward him, kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. A boy, maybe 13, 14 at most. His clothes were worn, his sneakers scuffed, but there was an air of quiet determination in his stride. As the boy approached, he took in the scene with a sharp, assessing glance, then met William's gaze with a polite but confident nod. "Got a flat, sir?" the boy asked, his voice steady. William hesitated for a moment before responding, surprised by the directness. "Yes, I was hoping to call for help, but my phone's got no signal out here." The boy gave a small, knowing smile. "Yeah, reception's spotty in these parts." He crouched beside the car, running a hand along the deflated tire. "I can fix this for you. Do you have a spare?" William blinked. "You can fix it?" The boy nodded. "My grandpa taught me how to change a tire last summer." For a moment, William considered turning him down. He had never needed a stranger's help before, let alone a kid's. But what choice did he have? "It's in the trunk," he finally said, gesturing toward the back of the car. The boy moved quickly, retrieving the spare and the tools with practiced efficiency. There was something almost effortless about the way he worked, his hands steady, his focus unwavering. William watched in silence, feeling something unfamiliar stir inside him. Humility. Minutes later, the boy wiped his hands on his jeans and straightened up. "All done." William reached into his wallet and pulled out a few crisp bills. "Here, take this. I appreciate your help." The boy took a step back, shaking his head. "No, thank you, sir. Just happy to help." William stood there, stunned, as the boy turned and walked away, disappearing down the road with nothing but a smile. As he got back into his car and watched the boy's fading figure in the rearview mirror, William felt something shift inside him. He didn't know why yet, but he knew one thing. He wouldn't forget this moment. The hum of the engine filled the silence in William Turner's luxurious Bentley as he drove back toward his estate. The air conditioning was set to the perfect temperature, the leather seats molded to his frame, and yet, for the first time in years, he felt uneasy. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as his thoughts kept drifting back to the boy on the side of the road. Noah. A teenager with worn-out sneakers, dusty jeans, and a quiet confidence that didn't come from wealth or status, but from something deeper. From something William had long forgotten. William had encountered thousands of people in his lifetime, executives, investors, employees. Every conversation had an unspoken exchange, a purpose, a price. Yet Noah had given something without expecting anything in return, and that unsettled him. Pulling into the long, winding driveway of his sprawling estate, William exhaled heavily. Everything about his home screamed success. Perfectly manicured lawns stretched for acres, leading up to a mansion of gleaming glass and stone. A symbol of everything he had worked for. Yet tonight, as he stepped inside, it all felt hollow. The grand foyer was silent, save for the faint echo of his own footsteps against the marble floors. The air smelled of polish and expensive cologne, pristine, sterile, lifeless. He made his way to his study, where floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes he rarely read. He poured himself a drink, letting the ice clink against the glass as he settled into his leather armchair. And still, he couldn't shake the image of Noah walking away, refusing his money, smiling as if he had just done the most natural thing in the world. William had spent decades chasing wealth, influence, and power, and he had achieved it. He was respected, feared even. But when was the last time someone had helped him simply because they could? He sipped his drink, staring at the untouched steak and asparagus on the table beside him. The meal had been prepared by his private chef, crafted to perfection, yet he had no appetite. Instead, he thought of Noah's dusty hands, his effortless generosity, the way he had carried himself with dignity despite having so little. William had never needed anyone, or at least that's what he had told himself. But that night, as he sat in his mansion filled with every luxury money could buy, he felt something missing. Connection. He set his drink down, his mind made up. He had to find Noah again, not because he owed him anything, but because, for the first time in a long time, William Turner wanted to understand. With a newfound sense of purpose, he rose from his chair, grabbed his keys, and stepped back into the night. Tomorrow he would return to that road. Tomorrow he would begin a journey that would change his life forever. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the quiet countryside as William Turner navigated the familiar stretch of road where he had met Noah. Something inside him refused to let the memory fade. The boy's quiet confidence, the way he had walked away without expecting anything in return. William had spent his life negotiating deals, understanding people through their ambitions and desires. But Noah had been different. He hadn't wanted anything. And that alone was enough to make William want to know more. He slowed his car near the spot where he had been stranded the day before, scanning the road for any sign of the boy. But it was empty. Just miles of asphalt stretching into the distance, flanked by tall grass swaying in the breeze. William sighed. He hadn't expected this to be easy. Pulling into a small gas station, he parked and stepped out, immediately feeling the contrast between this place and the sleek, polished world he was used to. The dingy convenience store smelled of motor oil and coffee, a sharp contrast to the luxury of his usual surroundings. The clerk behind the counter, an older man with a thick southern accent, barely looked up from his newspaper. "Morning," William said, clearing his throat. "I'm looking for a boy, about 13 or 14. Dark hair, skinny, confident. His name's Noah. Any chance you know him?" The man glanced at him over the rim of his glasses, then snorted. "Sounds like you're talking about Noah Carter. That kid's always helping folks around here. Got a good head on his shoulders." William leaned forward. "Do you know where I can find him?" The clerk shrugged. "Lives over in Brooksville. His mama works in town. They ain't got much, but that boy don't let it slow him down." Brooksville. William nodded his thanks and headed back to his car, his mind racing. A different world. An hour later, William arrived in Brooksville, a small town nestled in the rolling hills, a place that felt frozen in time. It was nothing like the towering glass buildings and bustling streets he was used to. Here, people waved at each other from their front porches, old men gathered outside diners with their morning coffee, and children ran barefoot along dusty sidewalks. After asking a few locals, he was finally directed to a small, worn-down house at the edge of town. The house wasn't run down, but it was clear that time and hardship had left their mark. The paint was faded, the front porch sagged slightly, and the fence was patched together with different kinds of wood. William hesitated before stepping out of his car. He had closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but now, standing in front of this humble home, he felt strangely out of place. Taking a deep breath, he walked up the porch steps and knocked. A moment later, the door opened to reveal a woman in her early 40s. She had sharp but kind eyes, a tired expression, and a posture that spoke of someone who had learned to carry the weight of the world without complaint. She studied William for a moment before speaking. "Can I help you?" He cleared his throat. "Good morning. I'm sorry to bother you, but I believe I met your son yesterday. Noah, right?" Her expression softened instantly. "That sounds like my Noah," she said with a small smile. "He's always helping folks." William nodded, suddenly feeling an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. "I just wanted to thank him properly. He wouldn't take anything from me yesterday." She chuckled, stepping aside. "That's Noah for you. He's out back, working on the fence. You're welcome to wait." A glimpse into Noah's life. William stepped inside and was immediately struck by the contrast between this modest home and his own grand estate. The furniture was old but clean, the walls adorned with family photos and hand-drawn pictures. A far cry from his mansion filled with art pieces that he barely noticed. There was something warmer about this place. Through the back window, he caught sight of Noah, hammering nails into the wooden fence, his movements precise, his focus unwavering, just like when he had fixed the tire. William felt an odd sense of admiration. This boy, barely a teenager, already carried himself with more purpose than most men he had met. Stepping onto the porch, he called out, "Noah." The boy looked up, surprised, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Hey, mister," he said casually. "What are you doing here?" William smiled, feeling strangely nervous, a rare occurrence for him. "I wanted to thank you again. You helped me when I really needed it, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." Noah shrugged, leaning against the fence. It wasn't a big deal. But to William it was. And in that moment, he realized that meeting Noah hadn't been just luck. It had been a wake-up call. A reminder of something he had lost along the way. Standing in Noah's backyard, William Turner felt something he hadn't in a long time. A sense of purpose. He watched as the boy wiped his hands on his jeans, his expression easy and unbothered, as if fixing fences and helping stranded drivers were just part of an ordinary day. William had spent his life surrounded by powerful people, men who measured worth by their wealth, influence, and the size of their bank accounts. Yet, here was a boy who had nothing and carried himself with more dignity than any billionaire he had ever met. And for the first time in years, William wanted to do something that didn't involve profit margins or personal gain. "I don't think you realize what a big deal it was," he said, breaking the silence. "People don't usually help strangers without expecting something in return." Noah tilted his head slightly, puzzled. "I don't see it like that," he replied. "If someone needs help and I can do it, why wouldn't I?" His words hit William harder than he expected. So simple, so obvious. Yet somewhere along the way, he had lost that perspective. He glanced around the yard, the patched-up fence, the faded siding of the house, the old swing set in the corner with chains that looked rusted and broken. They didn't have much, but they made do. His mind was made up. An offer they couldn't refuse. Later that evening, William sat across from Noah's mother, Emma, in their small but tidy living room. She had the same quiet strength as her son, her sharp eyes assessing him carefully. "You want to help us?" she asked, folding her arms. "Why?" William hesitated. He had spent his life making deals, calculating risks, and leveraging opportunities. But this wasn't business. This was something different. "Noah helped me when he didn't have to," he said finally. "And he wouldn't take a dime for it. That's rare. I don't want to just throw money at you. I want to help you the way your son helped me." Emma's gaze didn't waver. "We've managed fine on our own," she said. "We don't take charity." William respected that. "This isn't charity," he said. "It's repayment. You raised a boy with more integrity than most men I know. That means something. Let me do this, not because you need it, but because it's right." Emma studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A complete renovation of your home," William said. "Roof repairs, new paint, fixing up the yard, things that should have been done a long time ago." She hesitated, then glanced at Noah, who had been listening quietly from the doorway. The boy met his mother's gaze and nodded. Emma exhaled, rubbing her temples. "All right," she said at last, "but only if you let Noah help." William smiled. He wouldn't have it any other way. Breaking ground. By the next morning, William had called in favors from old colleagues, contractors, and suppliers. Within a week, trucks and workers arrived, turning the quiet street into a bustling work zone. Noah stood beside his mother, watching with wide eyes as materials were unloaded, ladders went up, and workers began measuring and cutting wood. "You didn't have to do this," Emma said softly, her voice filled with emotion as she watched her once-worn home transform before her eyes. William turned to her, his expression earnest. "You gave me something I didn't know I was missing," he said. "Let me give back." But it wasn't just about fixing a house. It was about showing up. And for the first time in years, William felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The sound of hammers striking nails and the steady hum of power tools filled the air as workers moved swiftly around the Carter home. What had once been a worn-down house was slowly coming back to life. Standing on the porch, Noah watched in awe as the transformation unfolded before him. New wood replaced the splintering boards of the front steps. Fresh paint brightened the faded walls. A crew worked on reinforcing the roof, while others rebuilt the backyard fence. It was more than he ever imagined. But what amazed him even more than the renovations was William Turner, the man who had made it all happen. Noah had expected him to oversee everything from a distance, issuing orders like a businessman handling a project. Instead, William was right there alongside the workers, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in hand, making sure every detail was done right. It wasn't just about fixing a house. It was about investing in something bigger than himself. A new perspective. During a break, William stood near the fence, wiping sweat from his brow. He caught Noah watching him and smirked. "Didn't think I'd actually do the work, did you?" he asked. Noah grinned. "Figured you'd just tell people what to do." William chuckled. "I've spent most of my life doing exactly that, but this feels different." Noah hesitated before asking, "Why are you doing all this? I mean, really?" William was silent for a moment, staring at the house as if seeing something beyond wood and paint. "Because," he said finally, "for years I thought success meant having more money, more power, more control. But none of it made me feel the way this does." He exhaled, turning to Noah. "This isn't about building a house. It's about building something that lasts, something that matters." The spark of a dream. As the days passed, Noah became more than just an observer. He spent hours watching the workers, asking questions, learning the names of tools, and studying the way things fit together. One of the workers, James Calloway, took notice. "You've got a good eye, kid," James said, handing Noah a measuring tape. "Ever thought about doing this for real?" Noah looked up, surprised but intrigued. "You mean, as a job?" "Sure," James said. "You've got the hands for it, and the heart." For the first time, Noah saw a path forward. Not just surviving, but thriving. And William saw something too. A boy who had given without hesitation, now realizing he had something to reach for. As the last plank was nailed in place and the final coat of paint dried under the setting sun, the house was no longer just repaired, it was renewed. And so was William Turner. As the final brushstroke of paint dried and the last nail was set in place, the Carter house stood transformed. Not just structurally, but in spirit. The sagging porch was now sturdy, the faded walls radiated with fresh color, and the broken swing set had been replaced with a new one that swayed gently in the evening breeze. Neighbors gathered around, marveling at the transformation. Children ran across the freshly repaired yard, their laughter filling the air. Emma Carter wiped a tear from her eye as she took in the sight of her home, reborn with warmth and hope. She turned to William Turner, her voice thick with emotion. "This isn't just a house anymore," she said softly. "It's a home." William looked around, seeing not just what had been rebuilt, but what had been restored: hope, dignity, and a future. More than just a lesson. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Noah stood beside William on the new front porch, hands in his pockets, looking at the house with quiet pride. "You know, Mr. Turner," Noah said, "I've been thinking a lot about what you did for us. I want to do something like this one day. I want to help people too." William smiled, placing a hand on Noah's shoulder. "You already have, kid. You helped me first." Noah frowned slightly. "How?" William exhaled, gazing at the twinkling lights of the town in the distance. "Because for a long time, I thought happiness came from having more. More money, more power, more control. But you, without even trying, you reminded me that life isn't about what you have. It's about what you give." Noah looked down, kicking at a loose pebble. "I didn't do anything special." William chuckled. "That's just it. You don't even realize how powerful a simple act of kindness can be. A ripple effect." As they stood there watching the glow of their newly built home, William realized this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Noah had a future ahead of him, one filled with opportunity and purpose. William had once thought his own journey was nearing its end. But now, he saw a different path, one where he could use his wealth, not for luxury, but for impact. And perhaps, just perhaps, this was what had been missing all along. A message for us all. As William stepped off the porch, he turned back to Noah and Emma. "This isn't goodbye," he said. "I'll be back. We've got more work to do." And with that, he left not as a wealthy man in a suit, but as a friend, forever changed by a boy who had nothing but gave everything. What about you? Have you ever experienced an act of kindness that changed your perspective? Do you believe that a simple gesture can create a ripple effect in someone's life? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's spread kindness, one action at a time. Subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us what truly matters. Because sometimes the smallest moments create the biggest impact.